It's still January. That means it's definitely still okay for me to be releasing a 2017 year in review video. And let me tell you, this past year was an incredible year of firsts. And 4K also basically ruined my year. Let's roll some highlights. So let's go over some firsts that happened in 2017. My debut film, Untethered, played on broadcast internationally. On Outside TV, in Air Canada, in-flight entertainment systems, in Spain, in France, in places I don't even know, which is amazing. I also haven't been paid in full from the distributor yet, from that whole thing. So that's something we'll have to dive into later. I spoke at my first conference this year at Craft and Commerce in Boise, Idaho, which was an incredible time. Had such a riot hanging out with some really cool creatives, getting to share about why I'm really passionate about video. It's also the first year I got access to a camera before its release date, the GH5. Sony and Canon, if you want me to make a sweet video with your camera that's not released yet, you know where to find me. I placed second in this global filmmaking competition run by Shotover, and I almost won like $150K of camera gear. My wife and I moved to a new city, and I got a small little studio, so I no longer had to edit in my living room. I got to fulfill a childhood dream by helping launch a backpack company. I actually doubled my revenue as a production company. It's worth noting, doubling your revenue isn't very hard if the previous year you didn't have that much revenue. But still, focus on the positives. I also continued to make shooting passion projects a priority by putting that on the calendar and spending close to 1/3 of my year shooting things that weren't guaranteed to make me any money. I also completely failed at launching and releasing my first web series, The Slack Life. Just completely failed at that. That's kind of a list of some of my firsts and highlighted events from the year. But let's kind of dive into the meat, the substance of what the year actually consisted of. So, fancy graphic right there. This is a pie chart. It's a pie chart of how I spent my time in the year. I spent basically about half of my time in the year on client projects. And when I say half of my time in the year, I'm talking half of my whole time. So not half of my time as if what I'm doing is a full-time job, meaning like I spent half of a full-time job on client work. I mean, half of like my life in 2017. So basically I spent more than a full-time job's worth of time on client projects, which as I said, went great. I spent about 1/3 of my time on shooting and developing original productions and short films. And then a little sliver of that went to YouTube and education, stuff like what I'm doing right now. And then there's some other stuff I spent my time on in there. So 2017 wrapped up my second year of running Leftcoast full-time, that being my sole focus. And at the end of 2016, I did a video kind of wrapping up, how did the year go? I called it my first year of full-time filmmaking. And I thought it would be fun to do a similar kind of wrap up in this video here, try to capture a snapshot, a moment in time of how do I feel 2017 went as a whole. So maybe we should start with some of the positives. Leftcoast Media House as a production company did great last year. I make videos for clients, not stuff that I often am able to bring you along with or share with you. But I do. That's how I make, as I said, a majority of my income. And in 2017, we doubled that. And it really felt like 2017 as a whole was a payoff for a buildup of things I've been doing leading up to last year, as trying to narrow down the focus of what my company offers and trying to only get those types of clients. And last year that happened more than ever. A majority of the client projects I worked on were outdoor adventure projects, which is fantastic. Like, these are the dream projects that I have in my mind when I go, those are the types of videos that I could best make for clients. In 2016, that was not the case at all. I did a lot of projects that were not specifically in the outdoor adventure-y type space. Despite not reaching my personal goals of how much effort I wanted to put into the YouTube channel this year, the response has continued to be phenomenal. So people like you that tune in and watch videos like this always blows me away. And so the YouTube channel did great last year, even though I am disappointed with my effort in it, but I'll get to that in a moment. So now let's unpack what sucked. 4K sucked last year, big time. Now, I don't want to run the risk of oversimplifying this. It's a complex problem for me. It has a lot of emotional tension in it for me, but I don't have an hour and a half to just kind of walk through all the details. So just bear with me here. I'm using the example of 4K as the pinpoint to attach and talk about what ended up being the hardest parts of last year for me. At the start of 2017, I had set aside time to edit my first web series. Now, I had shot this in August of 2016. I took a month and a half, shot 5 episodes of slacklining and highlining. That was supposed to be a follow-up to my first film, Untethered. Now, shooting went great. I got a lot of awesome content. As always, I learned some stuff. And when I went to edit this footage, something was different. So I had shot the series actually in 4K. Up until this point on my iMac, I had only been really editing 1080p footage and then some time lapses and stuff. I pictured I could edit these 5 episodes in about a month and a half. And when we got into January there, I started tackling the process. I had to go through this whole thing of making proxies of the 4K media because the computer really can't handle playback of 4K stuff very well, especially that H.264 codec. But I managed to stumble my way through a rough edit of my first episode, and that took 2.5 weeks. Like, first episode's taken a little longer than I thought, but we're at the stage where I can now color correct this thing and do my final touches, the little magic to make it into like a finished piece, And when I started doing my heavy color grading and all that inside of Premiere, and I would go to render it, the render times it was giving me for a 4K timeline, yada yada, was basically between 6 and 12 hours. And the main reason for this was some of the color grading effects I had on there and just other stuff, but I wanted it to look amazing. And the problem with this is, once I had started color grading, I can't really play back the timeline to see if the color grading is turning out the way that I want or if the sounds are working. And then it would take 6 to 12 hours to actually render a finished video. And oftentimes, for whatever reason, what have you, the computer would just crash partway into the render. I just barely got 1 episode done, and then I just really struggled, and I got 2 episodes done, and at this point that had taken a month and a half to do 2 episodes. At the end of this month and a half, I was starting to become really stressed, and one of the things that increased the stress was in the fall of 2016, I'd arranged to have Untethered actually distributed on broadcast, and they had reached out to me, and I had been reluctant at first, but they had talked me into it because they thought it'd be great, and they had talked about the fact that there would be money that would come my way from having the film be distributed. And this was a really challenging decision, and it had lots of layers. It was not a simple one, but I figured best case scenario, Untethered could actually make back the funds that I had invested to making it, and I could use that money to work on my next original piece of content. That seemed like a big win for me. I was frankly just really excited and looking forward to having a big cash bump from having the film go on TV. And no fault of any of the TV stations that played it, I just never got the money. But that's why, the reason why I'm explaining this is, once I had the 2 episodes done of the Slack Life series, I'd expected to have a large portion of the payment by then. It wasn't coming. The reality was I was just running out of money to be spending on something I was going to be releasing for free. And I just was frustrated with the editing process as a whole, and it pained me so much, but I just paused the releasing of the Slack Life series. I just had to stop. There's not much to it other than that. That ended up unfortunately shaping the forecast of what 2017 felt like as a whole. So I shifted and focused on getting client work projects, so that way I could bring revenue into the company, because cash flow is really important so you don't go bankrupt. And that went well. So I got some great projects to work on. And again, when I would go to edit these things, it was a nightmare. And for a majority of that first half of the year, I was stressed about cash flow and stressed about editing just taking longer than it's supposed to. Because it's one thing if you're just not being productive. It's another thing if you're physically just limited by a machine that can't keep up with your work. It felt like every client project I was working on needed multiple through the night work sessions just to get the thing finished on time, which isn't how I like to operate. I don't like running things down to the wire like that, and I certainly wasn't feeling good about doing my client projects like that. But the reality is I had no business shooting in 4K with the workstation that I currently had. I just had no business doing that. It couldn't handle editing the 4K footage, so I should have been shooting my stuff in 1080p because my computer could edit 1080 footage. And that's one of the things that hindsight just gives you a certain level of clarity, where I wish I could go back to February and change my cameras to 1080p and shoot the rest of the year like that. The quantity of projects was not necessarily an issue. And in fact, I had ambitions to do much more in my year, but I just got caught in this loop where I was editing projects for months before that were already shot in 4K, and they were really challenging to edit. And I didn't have the cash flow to really change the situation computer workstation wise. And that ultimately ended up adding in just this, last year was hard editing. There it is. And for the second half of 2017, it felt like I was underwater for a majority of it. And that's hard to acknowledge, hard to say. It's the truth. Obviously, with hindsight that I have now, I wish I had made different decisions. I was stressed. I had an unhealthy amount of stress that when I look at what 2017 as a whole felt like, I just know with clarity now that can't continue. That kind of ebb and flow of the work process and the editing process, it just needs to be a little different in the future. The biggest thing that kind of just helped last year be finished and closed as a chapter was just having incredible support from those that are like immediately close to me, who just pour love over me and just into what I do and support me unwaveringly. My family and my wife. And yeah, thanks if you're still tracking with me here for kind of just listening in on some of the more challenging stuff of this year. And there's even more layers to it than just stuff like editing. But I mean, we're just in a quick video here, so I'll try to close it off there. I do feel the trajectory we're on is still really positive. I'm excited about where Leftcoast is headed. I've got really big plans, and I'm just really excited about them, and I'm excited to do the work and bring more projects to life and share more stories. That just stirs a fire inside of me. I'm gonna create another video talking about what my goals are for this year and how I'm gonna approach it as a whole. If you've got questions, you can drop them in the comments. I'd actually maybe consider doing kind of a response to this video of whatever questions you drop below. I can maybe do like a response of what kind of questions you have from running the business this year, and maybe how some things went. But thank you. If you're just finding out about what I'm doing here on the Left Coast, it's really great to have you. If you've been following for years, I'm really grateful for your support. We're in for a wild ride this coming 12 months, and I'm excited to take you along on it. So that's it for this one. Remember, life's better when you make stuff.